Hello everyone, wishing you a peaceful and wonderful day. Today, we're going to discover an emotional story about a mother who disappeared for 20 years, and the heartbreaking moment her daughter finally begins to realize the truth. What would you do if the person you spent your whole life waiting for suddenly stood right in front of you? If you enjoy emotional family dramas filled with regret, silence, and unexpected reunions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos. The sky outside remained dark long after the house had gone quiet. Wind brushed gently through the vegetable garden, bending the hanging vines beneath the weight of the night air. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped slowly from bamboo leaves, left damp by the evening mist. The countryside carried a kind of silence that never felt completely empty. There were always small sounds hidden inside it, insects buried in the grass, wooden walls creaking softly, the low breathing of people trying to sleep while their thoughts refused to rest. Dieu sat alone near the doorway. She had not moved for a long time. The thin blanket folded loosely across her lap remained untouched, while her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness outside the house. The same darkness she had spent 20 years carrying inside herself. Inside the sleeping corner, Ni shifted slightly beneath the blanket and turned toward the wall, still asleep. One tiny hand rested open against the pillow. Peaceful, unaware, the child trusted too easily, loved too easily. It made Dieu's chest ache in ways she had forgotten were possible. From deeper inside the house came the soft sound of footsteps. Dieppe. She stepped into the room quietly, thinking everyone else was asleep. Her hair was still slightly damp from washing, loose strands falling beside her face as she walked toward the small table near the window. She stopped when she noticed Dieu still awake. For a brief moment, neither woman spoke. Then Dieppe lowered her eyes slightly. "You haven't slept yet?" Dieu shook her head once. "Neither have you." A faint breath escaped Dieppe, almost a laugh, but without humor. "I couldn't." The answer settled softly between them. Dieppe walked toward the table and poured water into a small cup before sitting down slowly across from Dieu. The weak yellow light, hanging above them, barely illuminated their faces now, leaving shadows beneath their eyes that made both women look more tired than before. Outside, the wind grew slightly stronger. The bamboo fence creaked. Dieu wrapped her fingers together tightly to stop herself from trembling. For years, she had imagined this moment differently. She had imagined anger, tears, questions, anything but this unbearable quietness. Dieppe lifted the cup toward her lips, but did not drink. Instead, she stared into the water, as though searching for something beneath its still surface. "When I was younger," she said softly, "I used to make up stories about my mother." Dieu's breath caught immediately. Dieppe continued, without looking up. "I thought maybe she got lost somewhere." A pause. "Or maybe she wanted to come back, but couldn't." The words felt almost impossible to hear. Dieu lowered her gaze quickly. Every sentence sounded gentler than she deserved. "I waited a long time." The wind outside pressed harder against the wooden walls. Then one day, Dieppe smiled faintly. "I realized nobody was coming." Silence followed, heavy, still. Dieu could feel guilt moving inside her chest, like something alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered before she could stop herself. The words escaped too quickly, too honestly. Diep finally looked up, not shocked, just confused. "For what?" Dieu froze. The room suddenly felt smaller. She searched desperately for something safe to say, but the truth had already risen too close to the surface. "For..." Her voice tightened. "Asking too much." Diep studied her quietly. There it was again. That feeling. The unsettling sense that this woman carried grief too personal to belong to a stranger. "You don't feel like a stranger," Diep said suddenly. The sentence hit harder than accusation. Dieu's fingers tightened together instantly. "What do you mean?" Diep leaned back slightly in her chair, while the hanging bulb flickered once above them. "I don't know." Her eyes lowered again. "It's strange." A long silence stretched between them. Then finally, "Sometimes when you look at me..." Diep hesitated softly. "It feels like you're remembering something." Dieu could no longer breathe normally. Outside, leaves rustled violently for a brief moment before settling again. She had imagined this conversation thousands of times over 20 years, but no version prepared her for the calmness in Diep's voice. No hatred, no blame, only confusion. And somehow, that hurt more. Dieu looked down at her trembling hands. "There are some mistakes," she said quietly, "that stay with a person forever." Diep watched her carefully now. The older woman's voice no longer sounded distant. It sounded exhausted, broken in places too old to repair. "What happened to you?" Diep asked softly. Dieu closed her eyes briefly. Memories moved through her instantly. Rain against bus windows, hospital lights, a crying child, a train station disappearing behind her, while guilt carved itself into her chest, one unbearable second at a time. 20 years. Gone. And yet standing here now, the pain felt untouched by time. "I made choices I can't take back," she answered finally. The honesty in her voice unsettled Diep more than the words themselves. Neither woman noticed tears filling Dieu's eyes until one slipped quietly down her face. She turned away immediately, ashamed. But Diep had already seen it. Something inside her shifted then. Not understanding, not forgiveness. Something softer. Compassion. And compassion frightened her, because compassion made people lower their guard. "Why did you come back now?" Diep asked. The question hung quietly between them. Dieu stared toward the darkness outside. "Because some things follow you forever." Another tear slipped down before she wiped it away quickly. And eventually, her voice weakened. "You get tired of running from them." The room fell silent again. Nee stirred slightly in her sleep nearby before settling once more. Diep looked toward the child for a moment, then back at Dieu. "If your family is still here," she asked carefully, "why haven't you gone to see them?" Dieu almost answered immediately, almost told the truth. But fear still held her throat too tightly. "What if they don't want to see me anymore?" she whispered instead. Diep lowered her gaze slowly. For the first time that night, her expression softened completely. "People wait longer than you think." The sentence nearly destroyed her, because Diep did not know she was speaking directly to the person who had spent 20 years praying to hear exactly those words. Neither woman spoke again after that. The silence between them no longer felt empty now. It felt fragile, as though one wrong sentence could finally break everything open forever. The night moved slowly around the small wooden house, heavy with the kind of silence that made every thought sound louder inside a person's head. Outside, the wind continued drifting through the bamboo fence and vegetable vines, carrying the cold scent of damp soil across the yard. Somewhere beyond the trees, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, too far away to become a storm, yet close enough to make the air feel restless. Inside, the weak yellow bulb above the table flickered once again. Dieu remained seated across from Dieppe, though neither woman had touched the cups of water between them for a long time. The conversation had stopped, but something invisible still lingered in the room, unfinished, waiting. Dieppe leaned back slightly in her chair, arms folded loosely, as though trying to protect herself from a feeling she could not fully explain. She had spent years teaching herself not to expect anything from the past. Not answers, not apologies, certainly not miracles. Yet sitting across from this woman now, she felt her carefully built calmness beginning to crack in quiet places, because nothing about Dieu felt accidental anymore. Not the way she looked at the house, not the way her eyes lingered every time Dieppe spoke, and not the pain she tried so hard to hide whenever the conversation drifted toward family. The thought unsettled her, enough that she finally asked the question she had been avoiding all evening. "Did you have children?" The room became completely still. Dieu looked up immediately. For one terrible second, fear crossed her face too openly to hide. Then she lowered her eyes again. Yes. Only one word, barely above a whisper. Dieppe felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Where are they now?" The older woman's fingers curled slowly against her lap. "I don't know." The answer sounded broken, not vague, not distant, broken. Wind pushed softly against the wooden walls outside, while silence settled heavily between them once again. Dieppe stared at her carefully now. "You lost contact?" Dieu nodded faintly. "A long time ago." "How long?" The question arrived gently, but there was nowhere left to hide from it. 20 years. The same number. Again. This time, it no longer felt like coincidence. Dieppe's breathing slowed almost imperceptibly. Thunder rolled farther across the sky outside. Inside the room, the hanging lights swayed slightly above their heads. "You came back after 20 years, Dieppe said quietly. Dieu said nothing. "You lost contact with your child 20 years ago." Still silence. The pieces were there now, incomplete, but close enough to touch. Dieu could feel panic rising quietly inside her chest. Not because she feared being hated, because she feared hope. Hope was far more dangerous. If Dieppe rejected her after learning the truth, then the last 20 years of regret would finally become permanent, real, unchangeable, and perhaps some part of her still could not survive that. Dieppe looked away first, eyes drifting toward the sleeping corner where Nee rested peacefully beneath the blanket. "When I was little," she said softly, "I used to imagine what I'd say if my mother ever came back." Dieu's throat tightened painfully. "What would you say?" Dieppe smiled faintly. Another exhausted smile. I thought I'd be angry. A pause. But now, the room waited with her unfinished sentence. I think I just want to know why. The words landed softly, yet they shattered something inside Dieu completely. Her eyes filled instantly before she could stop it. She turned away sharply, pressing trembling fingers against her mouth as if physically trying to hold herself together. Deep froze. Until now, the older woman had always controlled her emotions carefully. Even during the painful moments earlier in the night, she had hidden herself behind calmness, but not anymore. Now she looked devastated, not politely emotional, destroyed. And suddenly, fear moved quietly through Diep's chest. Not fear of danger, fear of understanding. Dieu. Her voice came softer now. The older woman shook her head immediately, unable to speak yet. Tears slipped silently down her face, while she struggled to steady her breathing. Outside, the first drops of rain finally began tapping lightly against the bamboo roof. The sound filled the silence around them. Diep slowly stood from her chair. For one brief moment, she considered stepping closer. Instead, she stopped halfway. Why are you crying? The question broke something open completely. Dieu lowered her trembling hands from her face and finally looked directly at Diep. No more distance, no more carefulness, only grief. I wanted to come back sooner. The confession escaped before she could stop it. Diep's heartbeat slowed painfully. The rain outside grew heavier. What do you mean? Dieu closed her eyes briefly. 20 years of regret pressed against her chest so violently she could barely breathe through it anymore. I thought, her voice cracked. I thought staying away would hurt less. Diep stared at her. Every instinct inside her now screamed the same terrifying possibility. But her mind still resisted it, because some truths changed everything forever once spoken aloud. You know something about my mother, Diep whispered. Not a question, a realization. Dieu looked at her helplessly, and in that moment, silence became the answer. The rain hammered harder against the roof now, loud enough to shake the fragile stillness of the house. Diep stepped backwards slowly. Her eyes never left Dieu's face. No. The word escaped automatically. Disbelief, fear, hope, all tangled together. Dieu stood abruptly from her chair, as though instinct alone had pulled her upward. Deep. The way she said the name this time was different. Not polite, not distant. It sounded painfully personal. Diep felt tears burning suddenly behind her own eyes. She hated it, hated how badly she wanted the impossible thing forming between them to be true. Because if it was true, then 20 years had been stolen from both of them. Tell me, Diep whispered. The room trembled faintly beneath the sound of rain. Dieu's lips parted, but no words came out, only tears. That was when Ni stirred awake behind them. Mom? The child's sleepy voice cut through the tension instantly. Both women turned. Ni sat up slowly beneath the blanket, rubbing her eyes in confusion while rain continued pouring outside the house. She looked from Diep to Dieu. Without understanding why, both adults suddenly looked broken. Then softly, "Why are you crying?" Nobody answered immediately. Diep wiped quickly at her face before walking toward the child and kneeling beside her. "It's okay," she whispered, but her voice trembled. Ni looked toward Dieu again. The older woman still stood frozen near the table, tears falling silently while thunder rolled above the house. Then the child asked the question neither adult was prepared to hear. "Grandma, are you leaving tomorrow?" The room went still. Dieu looked toward Ni slowly, then toward Dieppe. For 20 years, she had imagined returning home. But she had never imagined being asked to stay. And somehow, that simple, innocent question hurt more than every lonely year before it. As the rain falls through the quiet countryside night, the hidden connection between Dieu and Dieppe finally begins to surface. During a painful late-night conversation, Dieu admits that she lost contact with her child 20 years ago. The same amount of time Dieppe has spent waiting for a mother who never returned. The silence between them slowly turns into unbearable emotional tension as Dieppe starts realizing the truth she has feared to imagine. When Dieu breaks down in tears and confesses that she wanted to return sooner, the distance between past and present begins to collapse. But before the truth can fully be spoken, little Ni wakes up and innocently asks one heartbreaking question. "Grandma, are you leaving tomorrow?" In that moment, all three lives stand on the edge of a reunion that could change everything forever.